first question. When and where were you born?
I was born in Bayshore, Long Island, New York. It's on the island. Bayshore, Long Island, New York. I was born March 10th, 1924.
And yourself?
I was born in Decatur, Illinois on April 17th, 1930. And I don't remember being there, but I got to go back and see it once when I was a teenager because we had moved away from there. And I thought that was pretty classy to see the hospital where I was born. But that was all, there's a big red brick building. That's how it was.
If I may cut in here, I was born in Bayshore, which is on the island halfway up on the ocean side. And we were back there near Central Park, on the west side of Central Park, and I had never been to the Bayshore in my life. And we had a rented car, and the guy that was with us, he and his wife, he wanted me to drive through downtown New York to go to Bayshore, a town that I had no interest in, and I almost had to beat him over the head to say no. And that, if you're familiar with that area, that is a trip from West Central Park to Bayshore.
I can imagine my only experience in downtown New York was walking everywhere just so I could see everything.
Well, that too, I guess, but that was a long walk.
Yeah.
Speaking of seeing everything, we went to the Easter parade. The Easter parade has no animals, no nothing. The people come. All it is the people come out of St. Patrick's Cathedral and walk down Fifth Avenue, and that is Easter parade. And the people cheering them, greeting them and everything. And the whole sidewalks are filled with people watching other people walk down the island.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. Did you have siblings? What are your childhood memories? What did your parents do, and what were they like?
Oh, my parents. My dad was a traveling auditor, so we did. Especially I got to see parts of the country when I was way too small for it, and so we traveled quite a bit. We even went down to. We went through Tupelo, of course, being the home of Elvis at one time. So I feel proud. But we did a lot of traveling, especially that phase of our lives. Later on, what's that?
Did you have siblings?
Have what?
Siblings, brothers and sisters?
We had 6 in our family, and if we can split off there, we had 6 kids in the car, an Essex, or Hudson anyway, whatever, Hudson, either Essex or Terraplane, and they had the running boards with the sliding gates. You could put your furniture, your housing or whatever. We were moving. You put your suitcases in there, and we had 6 kids. In the middle of summer, we had 6 kids. One of them was Frank, was 6 weeks old when we started. He was in the hammock between the two cribs, just 2 seats. And how my mom ever fed him, nursed him, to this day is beyond me. I just don't know.
No air conditioning.
No, in the middle of summer. And as long as we're talking about that, we did go through Yellowstone at the time. We actually, I think we saw the formation of Mount Rushmore. I think so. And it took us, Mom, we could only travel 300 miles a day because of Mom nursing a 6 weeks old baby in the hammock. And I don't know why we didn't kill each other, but well, I was
Those kids all crammed in the back of the
I was fifth. Pardon me, I was fifth in line, and 4 days after I was born, my sister was 7 years old, and so that's the crowd that we had in that car. And I don't know how my dad made it, but especially my mom. I still think of that. I didn't think of it much till recently when we had our own kids.
What about you? What about your parents, your upbringing, siblings?
Let's see, I had 2 sisters and a brother. My brother was the oldest, and then me, and then the 2 sisters. And we got along pretty well together. There was a lot of years between us, 8.5 and 10 years between the 2 of us and the 2 girls and all that. And my dad was, part of the time he was a real estate agent, and he was a go-getter. He was always doing something and getting going. Worked with Caterpillar Tractor Company, and he started their credit union, and I didn't know that until I went to work there, and when they were interviewing us or whatever before we actually started a job, and I told him my name, and he wanted to know was I Ralph Telkamp's daughter, which I was, and he said, well, and your dad started the credit union. I didn't know that.
He, if I can cut in here, he had a favorite saying. He loved to have people in houses, and his favorite saying was, better in a tent than to pay rent. Yeah. And he lived by that motto. He would put down payment for a house to get somebody. That's the kind of guy her dad was.
So he looked out for his community, it sounds like.
He did. He just wanted people to be in their own home. That was it. My mom would say, I never knew when your dad came home, was he going to bring money, or did he say he gave it all away? But anyway, I was close with my sisters, not close with my brothers. He used to beat me up too much when we were growing up.
But they grew up beautiful friends.
Well, yeah, we became friends. But when he would come here to visit with his wife in the later years, I was glad when he went home after a week. He was not that much fun some of the time, but we loved him anyway. He died 2 years ago, and I really do miss him. And his widow is still alive, kind of, but she's been in a nursing home by herself. All through COVID, she's been in a nursing home where she couldn't have any visitors. She can't see and she can't hear. And she has nobody to come to visit her because one son died just after she was in there, and her kids were young. And her other son was so crippled up that he couldn't get out of his place in Illinois, and she was living in Florida. And I just feel so sorry for her. She just sits there day after day, and when I call her on the phone, she can't hear. So she doesn't answer the phone. If she does, she says, oh yeah, I'm okay, goodbye. She doesn't talk. And but I feel sorry for her. I don't know how my sister-in-law held up against him all those years. He was not an easy person to be with, but we loved him anyway. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom with the kids, and she always had meals ready for us and got us up in the morning to go to school. And she was just a typical mom, I think, typical homemaker, and all that. And I had to, I don't know. When I got ready to move out to California from Illinois, my youngest sister was only 12 years old, and she and I were really the closest of the 2 of the 4 of us. But anyway, she was really upset that I was going to be moving away, but I moved anyway. I was about 23, 22 at the time, and I didn't really understand the kids, or why would she miss me? But she did. I used to take her places and do things with her.
When I talk to these 2 gals on the phone, I have to ask, who is this? Their voices are that similar.
When I hear her voice on the telephone, I don't know who it is because she sounds like me.
Oh, well.
And we do look somewhat alike. Not a lot, but somewhat alike, more than the other two of us. And our sister, my sisters are only 18 months apart, so they grew up together more so than with me. I didn't realize how they idolized me because I was the oldest, but they were just two little kids I used to have to take care of. Which I'm glad I did it. And all the things we did when we were kids that we resented were so good for us doing it. But we didn't know it then. It's like, why do I have to do anything with these guys? Because that's how it was. And we helped my mother out. My mother wasn't real well, but she didn't take advantage of that. But if she overdid, she would just be in bed for a while. She was knocked out. She had a bad heart and all that. But
speaking of kids and family, it took us all of 3.5 years to have 4 kids.
So with that being said, and listening to your guys' upbringing, how did the Great Depression affect each of you?
Well, you were really young.
I was 15.
I didn't know. I didn't know we were in the Depression because the neighbors. We lived the same life. It was at 9 years old. Everything is okay when you're 9 years old. But I'll tell you about the Depression. The earthquake. About a little after 5 o'clock or something, we were out playing cops and robbers or something, and all of a sudden, the sidewalk. I was running. I took a big step and then a little step, and then a big step and a little step in my mind, and that was my the first impression I had of the earthquake, and following the earthquake, we had 6 kids, and we had 6 kids, and we slept in a 1-car garage, 8 of us, my parents and I, and the same 8 that came across the country in the car.
So where did you live when you finally settled down?
There, at the time of the earthquake, we lived at, I lived at Bennett and Broadway, which is a block in from Eximino in Long Beach. And I went to Fremont Grammar School, and I went to Fremont Grammar School at the time of the earthquake. And going to half-day school. Unfortunately, I was in the morning, so I got to play in the afternoon.
And what about yourself?
I was 11 when the war started, and so it didn't have very much effect on me. I can remember we used to have to save newspapers and turn them in, save them, do whatever we did with them after that. And and we had rationing, so we couldn't get a new pair of shoes till this rationing thing came up, or a dress, or food, or whatever you wanted, but you had to have a rationing stamp to do that. So my mom handled that. She did a good job with the 4 kids.
You speak of depression and all that. My mother could stretch a $1 bill like you never saw before.
Yeah, I think probably most of the women did at that time because they didn't have a choice. They had all these mouths to feed, and there just wasn't much money coming in. My dad would just do anything to make $1 or whatever, but he sold insurance. There were 5 cents a week for a policy, and he kept that going. But he'd bring those 5 pennies home, or nickels home.
Every week.
Every week he had to go around and collect them. That was still going on when I was married out here with my own kids, and I still had that policy that he bought way back in 1930 or whatever. That always kind of, how many of us sacrifice things like that now? I don't know.
my dad traveling up and down the valley, San Joaquin Valley, trying to sell to grocery stores punch cards. If you spend a dime, they punched a dime out of the French the card, and if you had enough punches, you would get either a pencil or a pen. And that's the way he tried to make money. He tried everything there was, but apparently it worked. I'll say this for my folks: they raised 6 very good kids. Every one of them was a credit to each other and to the country. I really mean that. Let me, on that expression, my oldest brother he volunteered for the Naval Air Corps. My next brother, he volunteered for the Army Air Corps. My next brother volunteered for the Army Air Corps. I was drafted into the Army Air Corps. And that was four guys during the war. And somebody said to Mom, "Gee, you're really fortunate because you have 4 kids in the service and they haven't even been wounded yet." And it cut her heart out, but she thought she was getting a compliment. But my younger brother had to wait to Korea for him to go in. And that was our basic military career.
So with that being said, where were you when December 7th, 1941 happened, and what were your thoughts?
Well, we were. I came home from church on the bus, if I remember, and everybody was talking about. Pardon me the expression. They were talking about the Japs, which was an okay term then. It isn't now, but it was my opinion, and I really truly thought about it. We'll go over there on Monday and come back Tuesday, and that didn't work out.
Yeah, we were both too young to understand what a war was all about. We used to see it on the newsreels like you see on TV. We would have to go to the movies, and then they'd show a newsreel on there. But this was happening other places to other people. It wasn't happening to anything that we saw. It was just there.
So at what point then were you drafted for the service? What year? And
how
did that process happen?
I was drafted in 45. And I was, let's see. No, 43, because that was the year I graduated from high school. Yes, 43. And it was March, I forget, when I say I forget. But anyway, I was drafted then. I can go through my service if you want right now.
Yeah, I would like to know, one of the questions I had was, how, if you volunteered, if you were drafted, if so, what were your thoughts when you were drafted by the Army Air Corps? And what was basic training like for you? Where did you go?
Well, I was going to be a hero like everybody else. It didn't really occur as a change of life because everybody was doing it. And I went from here to St. Pete and then Clearwater, Florida for basic training. And from there I went to Seymour Johnson Air Base in North Carolina and what was it, Goldsboro, North Carolina. And there they had an exhibit. They still had the slave market as an exhibit. And let's see, I was just aircraft mechanic school. I had the experience of having my brother as a superintendent of air hydraulics when I was going through there. But they took me out of that and sent me to Fordham University. I think it was more to keep the schools open, because they were cramming 6 regular term into 6 weeks. That was geometry, algebra, and what else? 3 majors. And as long as we're talking about it, I was sailing along there, and I got an invitation to go to Pennsylvania to see my 2 uncles and 2 aunts. I went over there with a bellyache, and all the time I was over there with a bellyache, I hid it from hid it from especially my aunts, and I rode the subway, and then the shuttle, and then the train to get to Philadelphia, and reverse later. But all the time I was in mortal pain. I was really, so I got back to Fordham Sunday night, and I told whatever the guy was, I told him I had to go on sick call. He says, "Can you wait till Monday morning? We're not really staffed." So I walked up 2 flights of stairs and came back about a half hour later and said I couldn't make it. Well, I had my appendix out before the night was over. And in those days, they cut my appendix out, and you talked about asking nurses about this. I was in bed for 10 days. I was in the hospital, and this was normal. I was in the hospital for a full 30 days. And boy, by the time I got out, my muscles were so weak, I had to learn how to walk and everything else. But that was the start of it. Then what happened? I went back to AM school, aircraft mechanic school, and ended up in North Carolina, and then I ended up in Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I went from there. While I was there, I spent time at gunnery school shooting turrets, and off the movable aircraft turrets and the upper turrets. And they even had them equipped with we really used 50 caliber for part of the time, but part of the time we used shotgun shells. One guy loading this one while you were shooting the other one, but you could shoot, in a regular turret. You would shoot both 50 calibers at once. Fortunately for us, by the time we got there, they knocked all the German fighters out of the sky, so we never did fire at a German. I saw one plane went over. We went over the sub-pens up in Denmark, and on way back, one flight went over the secondary target, which was Helgoland, which was an island off the coast of Denmark or wherever up there someplace, and they used that as a secondary target. And watch that plane would lose its base, the wing at the base, and watch it spin in. You breathed a sigh of relief when they hit the water. You really, really did. And then we got to Keflavik, Iceland, on the way to Goose Bay, Labrador. And I bet some people denied this happened. We got heading from Keflavik, Iceland, which is across the island from Iceland is an island. And across the island was Reykjavik, the capital, and we had a little bit of. They would let us fly around Europe, okay, but they were reluctant to let us fly back to the United States so they could destroy the plane with only six generators. We were a lead plane, so we had 7 generators, 2 generators on each inboard engine. And so we were flying from Keflavik to Goose Bay, Labrador, and we were in touch with a plane that for some reason was lost. The B-24 was lost, and they didn't know what to do. And so I told the pilot we had about an hour's fuel left, so we went out to look for it. And Don DeLugas, the tail gunner, found it, and they figuratively we towed it back to Goose Bay, Labrador, and it landed downwind, which is a no-no because you try to use the wind as a brake. And so when we got over to operations, this crew was here and we were here, and this one guy says, well, who's your radio operator? And we pointed out this Jack Stirring, and the guy went over and he went like this. Without saying a word, he walked away.
Those guys were mighty scared in that plane, and they didn't know where they were over the ocean.
Before that, actually, we had our best plane we ever had was the worst plane we ever had. We were coming back on a mission, and I was an engineer. We didn't think we could fly across the channel, so the pilot talked into a land on the continent. So we ended up with Lille, France. We were there for 3 days while they fixed it. So that was the best plane we ever had. Well, it was the worst plane we ever had. Then we finally got back to the States, and I only had 15 missions because we knocked them all down. We were there in May, and that was the end of the war.
So what was your first thoughts when you found out you were going to be deployed overseas, and where did you end up as your forward operating base?
Go with the flow. Everybody was anxious to get overseas. In fact, our navigator, some navigators flew the new planes over, and some went by ship. I went by ship. I often said I made that trip by rail because I was leaning over the rail all the way over. but he just really cried because they didn't trust him. He was stoned out of his gourd, but they didn't trust him to fly a plane. But he was a good navigator. Just there wasn't room for him to fly a new airplane back. But we all came back. I'm the only one left now, but that's...
Well, but your pilot, you don't know why he didn't get rid of you because you were always sick.
They couldn't find one, and they was afraid if they floored me, if they grounded me, they couldn't find another operator, another engineer, and they couldn't get over there so fast. But flying over Berlin, and I had an occasion upchuck in my flak helmet. Now what do I do? I wonder what the crew chief, the ground crew chief, wondered when he found that helmet. And I couldn't throw it overboard because there were so many planes up there. You were afraid to hit the prop of a plane following you. Well, that was it.
So let's backtrack a little bit. You mentioned you were sent to Europe, I'm assuming England, as your forward operating base.
What's that?
I'm assuming you went to England for your forward operating
we flew
base?
out of England.
So how was your...
Adelbridge, England.
Were you when you took your ship from mainland America to England, you spoke about being sick. What was that journey like? How long did it take you? Were you on a transport with escorts?
I don't remember the number of days, but it was a long time. Probably 4 or 5 days. But I don't. I wasn't alone.
Were you going over with a lot of other Army air crews?
Yeah.
That were going to basically...
We were all replacements.
Okay.
We were filling in.
But I think he was sick the whole time with him, sort of.
So I bet you were happy when you finally got to England.
But,
and what were your thoughts of England when you had finally got there? Just the country as a whole and being out of the United States for the first time?
First of all, you had to get used to different people, that's all. I was never much of a mixer anyway, so there wasn't a great deal of change. I just did what everybody else did. I was I wasn't one. I didn't. I wasn't one to join the people. Anybody. Uh, you had to know me pretty well before I recognized you. You know, very shy, very very shy.
Well, while you were in the plane and you weren't hearing anything from DeLugas.
Oh, oh, I, I, our tail gunner was back there. Of course, when you're not in combat, actual combat, you're kind of at ease. And I look back and something wised me up about DeLugas, and I think I held up 3 fingers or 2 fingers or whatever it was, and he didn't respond. So I took a reportable oxygen bottle back to him and found out that he'd frozen his face mask. So that was nothing. That just happened.
Yeah.
So what was your thought on your first actual bombing mission? You were flying B-24 Liberators, is that correct?
I was really worried about the pilot took a mission first. I was worried about him, and my feeling about any flight was more. I always figured I was numb. It just happened. You know, I had to do this and I had to do this and I had to get in the plane and I had to wait till we took off and then I flew when I wasn't doing mechanic work, which is a small part of it. I was a top turret gunner, which I never did have to use, fortunately.
And what was your view on, for say, your first bombing mission and afterwards, the effects that you see in flying information?
I was glad to get to the ground. Yes, we were another thing. We were flying one day, and the co-pilot went wild, and then we had our pilot was I say he was a calm guy because he was from Ohio farmer. And the co-pilot started yelling, and the pilot says, "Shut up." And about 10 minutes later, he says, "Say, fellers, you know what happened? We picked up a piece of flak." That was an expression between the two guys.
Yeah. So did you ever run into heavy flak as you were
doing
your
flak,
over
yes. Aircraft, no, but flak, yes. We used to say we could taxi home on the flak.
And what were your thoughts the first time you ever got into heavy anti-aircraft?
I don't know. I guess you think, well, I'm either going to make it or not. I don't know. I don't remember nailing down a thought other than I'll be glad to get out of this. That's all.
And you said you flew 15 missions, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So how long was your total deployment overseas then?
I went over the first week in January, and then we finished the war in May. And then it took us about a month or so to get back to the States. And then they didn't know what to do with us, so they put us in training for B-29. And even after the war, they had training they had to keep the guys busy. So even though they knew they were wasting time, they had to keep the guys busy or they would have gone nuts. So they had to keep us busy till they could discharge us. I was discharged in the San Bernardino.
So when the war in Europe ended and you had headed home, was there talk of you having to go to the Pacific Theater to finish off that section?
It was there. It was there.
And what were your thoughts about that possibility?
Well, the day the war ended, I said, here they come out with these rumors. And it proved not to be a rumor. But so many rumors floated around about everything that you knew this was a rumor, but in fact, it was a fact. In fact, it was a fact.
And is that in regards to the atomic bombs being dropped?
Huh?
Was that in regards to the atomic bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
We were after a target. We were trying to make a good bomb run. That's all. That's all ever. You didn't think of the people. You didn't think of the destruction. All you thought about was we had a good bomb run and maybe we did some good.
So the wars ended. How long afterwards did you get discharged?
Not too long.
And what were your thoughts when you were finally out of the Army?
I had an only opinion with my self-opinion. I made a gag out of it. When you're in the service, if there was a cigarette butt, you had to pick it up and put it in. Somebody dropped a cigarette. It was up to you to make sure the area was clean, and they called that policing the area. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm gonna, and they asked us to police the world, to join the Marines, the reserve, and I thought, in a joking manner, I thought, well, if I'm going to pick up cigarette butts the rest of my life, they can have it.
Yeah. And then what about your brothers? You said your three older brothers also served as well between the Army Air Corps and then also the Navy Aviation.
My brother, in aviation, and he worked in the office in L.A. until he finally got to fly. And he was on a PB-4Y2, which is a single-tail Navy version of the B-24. B-24 has twin tails, and he was on a PB-4Y2. My brother Joe was he was on a B-26, which was a medium bomber, and they flew combat. We flew strategic, and they flew tactical, which meant they were right on the line. He had 48 missions. I had 15, and he actually rode 2 planes into the ground.
And then your other brother, who was in the Navy, did he fight in the Pacific Theater?
Eddie he had the rough one. He was on the ground crew in Victorville, repairing the planes. There was a training base.
George Air Force Base?
Huh?
Was it George Air Force Base?
I don't know what it was, but my brother Frank was in Korea, and he must have been in communications, because he was the guy that kept the lines open between bases, the phone lines and the communication lines. He kept them open.
So the war's over. You're back home. What are your thoughts now? What do you do, and how do you two meet?
I didn't do well. I was on what we get, $21 a month or something, and I lived on that till May. To March, maybe it was March. I finally got a job as a printer, and I ended up my big job was I was a printer for the Press Telegram for 3 months short of 45 years. Now I find any job that lasts 45 years now.
And how did you two meet? How did you two meet?
How do we meet?
Yes.
Well, I worked with a guy that was a pagan Feeney. Lived.
2 of us girls had apartments next to each other. And so she said one day, "You need to meet this nice Catholic boy, our friend Jim." And so we met.
And that was the last time we were ever going to meet. And in a week, this thing will be 66 and a half years old.
And I don't wear mine because my knuckles got so big I couldn't get my rings on or off. And that was okay. I was just as married when I had my rings on.
So you guys, after that, settled down. Long Beach, had a family.
Yeah. Let's see. We met in August. We got engaged in December, and we got married in April.
Both on the 7th.
Yeah.
And
And our first child was born about 10 months after that, and about, I don't know, 12 or 13 months after that, and 12 or 13 months after that. So we had 4.
So, what are your thoughts with both of you living such a long life and so much experience and so many stories? What are the things that you've learned to cherish? What are the things that have made you proud? What is any advice you can pass on to the other generations?
Right here. That's
Just
the best I could
been
say.
able to be together
Right here.
and be at home with one another.
And we were both good citizens. We have 4 good citizens, and they all 4 are the top of their trade. 2 electricians, and one travels all over the country he works for a place called Rain for Rent, which carries liquids to oil wells. Liquids or poison or gas or whatever, chemicals or whatever to oil wells. And our daughter went to Jordan High School in Long Beach, and she went to college, got her majors, and now she's teaching special ed kids at Jordan High School.
Back to where she started, huh?
Yeah.
And my brother Frank he was in the I think he was in the communication that kept the lines open in Korea, and that was really, I had the easiest job.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think that kind of covers a lot of the questions that I initially had. I think at this point, if Matt or anybody else has anything they would like to add or questions they have for themselves that they would like to ask.
Like, how do we get to know these guys?
Where'd they find that one?
In the back house. When you returned from war and you ended up meeting Grandma and you guys started seeing each other, what were you guys both working in? I know you were doing the printing business, but what was your life looking at the time, Grandma? What were you doing?
Typing at an office and doing whatever I forget what my title was, but anyway, I was there until we met then. And then it wasn't long after that we got engaged and got married, and it was time. Well, we were married, but I thought, I don't know why I'm here. He had 2 days a week off during the middle of the week, and I had weekend days off. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. So I thought, this is goofy, so I quit working, just like that.
That was the solution.
Yeah, we just did at the time what looked like it needed to be done, but we've always gotten along really well. We don't have to yell at each other or say, I'm going to shoot him we haven't had to do that because we always like doing things together.
That's pointing to the 66-year ring also when you say that.
Now, when he asked you the question a little while ago, what's some advice you can give to all people in the younger generations, and you pointed to Grandma, right? And I would like to hear you elaborate more on why you pointed to Grandma, why that relationship is so important to you, and why you want to pass that on.
I guess you have to be there to understand that, but we just like being in one another's presence, and that hasn't changed in all these years. I'm not saying that we always agree on everything. That's not the important thing. But if one of us feels really well, I'm not going to change my mind, and that's the way it is. Then the other one backs off, and so we just handle it that way rather than fussing about it or, well, I'm right and you're wrong. That doesn't seem to come up, and it just is. And then we had all these kids and grandkids and great grandkids, adopted kids, and
one of our kids, I forget which one, but somebody asked him, "Don't your parents ever fight?"
Don't ask me. We did. So I just laughed at whichever one it was.
If we would have a fight, it wouldn't be in front of the kids anyway. It's not their battle.
We just our kids were the most important thing in our lives besides the two of us. It was just important that we be with the kids and do things with them, and the grandkids came along, same thing. Just, Chris and Matt were our first ones, and they were the bells of the ball. They were just something else. But then Mike and Jenny got married, and she had 2 kids, he had 2 kids, and then they adopted 2 more.
Now I want to rewind a little bit. You guys have lived this long life. You've seen a lot of things change over time, and I want to know, of the things that you've watched change since you guys were born, what has stood out to you? What are those moments that really changed your world? And you go, wow, this is incredible, or maybe this is harmful.
I don't know.
I don't know. I never thought about it that way. I guess
the big change, of course, I guess, is the electronics, which I'm not into at all. But electronics, in fact, it's to realize that they just cracked open the door, and you wonder where are we going to be?
Where is it going to go?
Where do we go from here? They know so much about you now. Wait till they really find out about you. Yeah. We ride to what they call the access bus here. You give them your name, and they'll tell you. They'll look up the computer. There's our name and our address and everything else on it. But people, you don't know how they do it, but they know that's scary. The computers are very, very good, but they're very, very scary on the other hand.
We call up our access bus here. It's a small bus. And say, I want the bus at 6:30. No, at 11:30 here on Monday and Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. But anyway, and that bus will come and be here at that time. We might be the only passengers on there. It'll take us over to Clubhouse 1, and when it gets to be after 3 o'clock, we call again. Okay, we need an on-call bus to pick us up at Clubhouse 1. And they'll be there. We go outside, wait a few minutes, and here comes our bus with probably the same driver. Picks us up, brought us home. We were probably the only passengers. They take real good care of us here in Leisure World. We've got our own medical center and our own pharmacy, our own doctors, and when we need to see specialists, sometimes the specialists will come here. Other times we need to go to their offices. But the hospital's only 3 miles away, so we can get them. And we both use the ambulance that sits here on our property all the time to take us down for emergency calls. So we both have used that.
Since the virus thing, I actually called up the 911 5 times from Christmas Eve till it's all over. I was in the St. Memorial. I went there and they put me, I was down in emergency for quite a while. Then they put me in a room all by myself. I thought, gee, this place must really be crowded to put me all by myself. It was after I got out of the place that I realized that I'd had the virus. I had no idea why I was in there. In fact, they had me in a regular bed. They put me in a rubberized bed, and then they took everything away. And not only they took everything away, but I had a hearing aid that went with it, and I never did. And there again, talk about progress. They threw my hearing aid in the garbage or whatever. And about 2 weeks later, I had one from Denver, digitized off the computer. They were able to digitize this hearing aid. That's something else.
Now, with your experience with COVID, I know you guys spent the last 2 years going through it like the rest of us did, but since in the last like 80 to 90 years, have you experienced something similar in the world? I know the war happened and that changed everything, but what other big occurrences happened that you really saw the whole world shift?
But doesn't it kind of scare you, wonder what's going to happen in another 20 years?
Yeah. Real now, I'm thinking back when my mom would have been a little girl. That was back in like 1918 or something. And so they would have had something like that because everybody had whatever went on at that time.
Spanish influenza.
Yeah. And so I thought, oh well, now we're going through that, and so what's going to happen next? We don't know. But we don't sit and worry about what's going to happen next. We just think, well, whatever it is, we live through this much, and we can probably live through the rest. And when it's our time to go, we're ready. We're ready. We don't mind that we're this age and that we probably don't have that much time left. That's okay. You get to a point where that's just the next step in life.
It's part of life.
Or life after life or something. Yeah, we don't give it a...
When does this interview start, do you know?
I don't know. After a while. Would that do?
I'm going to go a little personal here, and I'm going to ask you about your marriage. What do you believe are some things that you guys have done over the years to really keep your marriage as close and as beautiful as it is? Things that you've kept practicing?
We go to the same church. We believe pretty much the same things. We pray every day. And we like to pray together at night. We say a rosary together, and we've got a book we read, short.
And we don't argue about too many things. If one of us, the best way we handle it is, as I don't quite agree with it, I just keep my mouth shut. And if it doesn't hurt anything, I certainly don't stand there and yell at each other.
Well, as long as we can keep each other around, that's our goal right now. Just keep each other around. I don't care if you can do things or if you can't do things. That's okay. Just hang around.
In a previous conversation we had, you guys talked about square dancing.
That was a big part of our lives.
That was such fun.
How long did you guys square dance for? How did you start square dancing? Where did you find that?
Somebody invited us to go, so we went, and that was before we moved out here.
We probably square danced 4 or 5 years in North Long Beach, and we square danced probably 15 years here. Yeah. And we enjoyed every minute of it.
That was just such a good time.
In fact, that is a really good way to make relationships, because to be a good square dancer, you can square dance in 2 or 3 months and get along fine. To be a really good square dancer, you really work at it for a year, and all the time you're with the same crowd, and you get to know people deeply. And that doesn't mean you have to be an expert square dancer to square dance with the experts, because you just worked out that they'll fit you in. But I tell you, it's a darn good way to make good relationships. Yeah. And if you can stand around somebody for the better part of a year, you know what kind of person that is. That's always been my feeling. Side, not in our case, it didn't have to do that way, but we've seen a lot of relationships through square dancing.
And I'm thinking of that one period of time when we had a young group of kids who could square
Oh
dance,
boy.
and they would come and be with the old folk. We weren't that old then, but with the old folks, and they had so much energy. And think, man, I hope they don't stay forever. But we had such a good time with them. They were very friendly. And
It
very
picked us
good.
up. It picked us up to their level. It did.
Yeah. And we would know we were square dancing after they would leave. But anyway, they came several weeks just to be with us, and that was really fun. I can't think of any time that wasn't fun while we square danced. People were nice. We go different places. We've been out on
The Queen Mary, the Knott's.
Berry Farm.
We took a tour to Hawaii.
I keep thinking we went to San Francisco, but I know we didn't go that far.
We went to 3 different islands in Hawaii. Just
square dancing, that was it. And we got where we couldn't square dance anymore. We started playing cards.
You haven't stopped.
And our thoughts about playing cards is right now somebody has COVID from one of our group last Monday. And so now we're quarantined for another week or so before we can go back to play cards again.
Through this series of whatevers, I've lost part of my vision and part of my hearing. So I don't know whether I put it on my 98 years or the COVID. I just don't know why I lost, especially my hearing, my vision.
Well, yeah, 6 or 8 months ago, you were still driving the car,
Yeah.
going shopping.
I gave up my driver's license when it expired on my 98th birthday in March 10th.
Before that, he could drive us around and go to the store. I couldn't do that anymore.
I started Park by Sound, and I figured that's
I want to change the subject a little bit here. Sorry, I'm bouncing around.
Okay.
You guys have seen a lot of changes in electronics, like you said. But one of the big things is like the television, music, news. And what's your opinions on those changes?
music.
I know you love music, and I would love to hear how you feel about how music has changed from when you were growing up to now, and how you feel about music.
It's louder now. We can do without louder. That's all I think about it as it is. But anything that comes out with a good melody that you can hum or learn the words to, that's okay. We like that. But I'm thinking about TV. I had moved out to California. I think maybe my folks bought a TV about the time I left home. And so then I didn't have a TV until we got married. And we bought a new TV together.
Your TVs that were, maybe 8-inch or 8 or 10 inches. It cost about $600 or $700. And in fact, they had one model. It's hard to believe, but they had one model that on the screen, the bottom was green, and the middle was brown, and the top was blue. Screen. It was printed on the screen. That was their.
So it would look like that.
Looked like it was a color television.
Oh wow! So that was before color television.
And I learned all about Gorgeous George by standing on the street corner watching the TV in a radio shop.
Oh, yeah,
Cold.
Stores had TVs blaring out at you, and you could walk along and watch a little bit of TV that way.
Would you guys find a lot of people doing that, walking around, and you see people huddle around where the TV was at?
Uh-huh. What'd you see on TV? Oh, I saw this. Or whatever. It was just something new.
I'll tell you what drives us nuts. What we really, really truly like, and don't laugh at this, but we we get to see over and over again Hogan's Heroes.
And we watch those every night,
50-some issues of it, and we've seen them all over and over again.
100 times. Yeah.
By the time you see them again, you'll forget what they were all about.
And we like all the old or a lot of the old programs that are on there from back in the 60s and 70s and all that. So it's like we saw them then, now we're seeing them again.
A way to revisit that past, right?
Yeah.
Now, as kids growing up during that time, what were the things that you would do for fun? How would you connect with other kids, connect with their families, talk to one
Oh,
another?
well, we always had neighbor kids we could play with.
Where's television going to go from here? What else can they do? They can't bring it right into the room.
They can't. We'll see. But yeah, we always had neighbor kids, and we didn't go usually into other people's houses, but we could play with the kids in the yard or go down to this one. We can't let our kids or grandkids or whatever can't go to those places now like we did as kids. We were free to roam around.
When we were growing up, I think when we were growing up, it was almost a fact that in almost every block there would be an empty lot that ended up being a baseball field or football or something. But you just don't do that now. There's no room for it.
Well, and they didn't have any adults there telling them how to do it or being their coaches or whatever. They were just kids playing these games and doing their thing. Nobody was bothering them.
Do you guys remember your first baseball game you went to or football game?
I remember going to the Angels. However, this was at what is it, 49th and San Pedro or something. The old Wrigley Field in L.A. The old original Coast League Angels had nothing to do with this outfit now, but it was that Wrigley Field up there was a cozy little place, nice to go. And here was the ball coming rolling down the aisle, and the people were talking to each other, and one of them looked down and grabbed the ball right before it. Who's going to pay for the electric bill?
Oh, I imagine we might. We just might do that.
I think pretty soon here we're going to start wrapping up, but what I would like to do is open the floor to anybody in this room that has any questions for you. Are you okay with having
Whatever anybody asks us, we'll do our best to answer.
Perfect. If you want to ask some questions,
I would especially like him to ask questions.
If you want to come sit over here, you can come sit
Come on over here, and
So I have a quick question while he sits down.
maybe I'll tell you what I flew. I flew in the B-24, which was a four. Are you familiar with the B-24?
I am.
It's 4 engines, and they burned a gallon a minute of high octane for each one of the engines. That's 240 gallons an hour, and we had 2,400 gallons of gas was our capacity, so we could theoretically stay up for 10 hours.
That's cool.
And we have the kind of the hero, if you want to say it, of the 8th Air Force was B-17. Well, the B-24 flew higher and faster and carried a bigger bomb load and could travel farther than the B-17, but B-17 was the airplane.
Yeah. Have you been in a B-20, B whatever I said, B-24?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I got to visit one day, went down here in Long Beach, and I don't know where they put all those men on there at their where their guns were, their turrets and whatnot. And I walked from one end of the plane to the other, and you're just walking on a narrow, probably maybe a 10-inch board or something to get down there. Then there's sky down below you.
Yeah, there were in effect 4 bomb bays, and I guess you'd call it the keel of the ship. Went there, and the guys, if they had trouble in the bombs, somebody had to go out and try to kick the bomb out or something on that. Like I say, it was about a 10-inch wide plane, and you're flying it somewhere between 20 and 24,000 feet. And well, if you're 150 feet up, it doesn't matter any more than 24,000 feet.
Anyway, I don't know how they got all those guys on there and how you walked back and forth and did all that. That's the only time. I just was in there one time, but that was a surprise.
I'll tell you a little bit more technically. We had 7 generators. We had the putt-putt was the generator they used for the ground operation because they couldn't drive the 4 engines, because of logistics. They couldn't use it for turning and up and down, so they had the little generator on rather than the other ones were turning, but they weren't turning their capacity. They were turning at the speed of the little putt-putt, and then so we had the putt-putt, and then we had a generator for each of the engines. So that gave us 4 main generators and the putt-putt, and then we got to be a crew, a lead crew, and we got more aircraft equipment, more electronic equipment, and so they put 2 more generators on, one more on each of the inboard engines. So we ended up actually with 6 operating what I say, generators, and then the little ground outfit. You just couldn't run the big ones on the ground. You had to use the little one.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a question.
What?
Were you ever on the receiving end of a bombing raid?
What's that?
Were you ever on the receiving end of a bombing raid? So while you were in base in England, did you ever have Luftwaffe come over and bomb your base?
No. Fortunately, we didn't see. We were very, very fortunate. The only trouble we ever had was flak.
Yeah.
And that was really something. That was scary.
Oh, yeah. Tell me how your planes formed themselves.
Oh. I don't know if you knew this, but say this was a circle, like a racetrack, and the corners would be cut off. And the first planes would make the big circle. And the next plane would cut the circle a little bit shorter. They call that the racetrack. And so the last planes up didn't have to fly as many loops around to get a. They were trying to get a formation, V-shaped formation, three planes to, I guess you call it echelon, and here, and here. We were on still in training here. I was in line for pay, and all of a sudden there was a boom up in the air. And what happened was one plane, the way we figured it out, the plane 3, 1, 2, 3, plane 3 had wheel trouble, landing gear trouble, and they were trying to get the landing gear up, and they lost their spot, so this the guy that was flying 6, the one below them, 6 moved up into 3, and by the time they got up there, they had fixed up 3, and you see the 2 B-24s go down, and on training, and that had to hurt. You figure the planes had either 9 or 10 men. In fact, when we got to be the lead airplane, we had 3 navigators. I don't ask me what the names were. When I think they had piloted the G-box and what else was it? But they had 3 different human being navigators on board the B-24.
That's extremely cool. Thank you very, very much.
So I have one quick question. You being a veteran of the Second World War, going through that experience, what is your opinion of modern war with the first Persian Gulf being televised in 1990, all the way up to the current conflict?
There won't be another war. There'll be the end of the world. More, I can't see. That is really scary. If that guy over in North Korea gets a little bit wild, and that's. I don't think you're too worried about the big countries. I think their brains are enough. You don't know. You just don't know. But a guy like that guy in Korea, North Korea, they're just kind of scary. That's about it.
Yeah.
Does it amaze you how much war has changed from a technology standpoint?
Huh?
Does it amaze you how much war has changed from a technology standpoint to you guys flying information to modern day fighter jets that you would see now and the capabilities of modern warfare?
Oh, it must be incredible. I didn't see any of it because I was too young and didn't know what an airplane was hardly.
Do you realize the cost of some of those are over $1 million?
Yeah.
Up into billions of dollars for one airplane?
I'm looking at my mom and her second husband in a picture over there. After about 25 years of being a widow, and he was a widower, and they met and got married, and they had about 9 years together. And they took good care of each other. And he wasn't like my dad, but he was a good guy, and my dad was a great guy. But anyway, he looked after my mother, and that was good. That's about the only big picture I have of them. They're kind of big enough to look at. Don't even have a good picture of my dad. Might have a snapshot of him here or there. My folks were fun. They were a good team, and my dad thought my mother was it. She was it.
My folks got
This is for your mother. This is for your mother. This is for your mother, and don't you forget it. He just thought so much of my mom.
My speaking, this is way off the subject, but speaking of marriage and stuff, I always figured that if I went into marriage to do half of the work, it's not going to work. You can't do half of the work. You can only do the work that is available, whether it's your half or somebody else's half. When you start splitting up to percentages, you're in deep trouble.
Do what needs to get done.
Good advice.
Did you have some questions, brother? I think I have more else to go. Okay. Do you guys want to ask anything else as of right now?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yay for us.
Thank you guys for doing this.
Oh, thank you for bringing in all
Thank
your
you.
equipment. and
Now,
whatnot.
what happens to the film?
Oh wait, it wasn't recording.
No, I
They
mean
just
seriously,
pretending.
seriously. Will we see a copy of it or something?
absolutely.
Absolutely.